We begin the last leg of our Brazilian journey to discover the coastline of the states of Paraná, Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul. In the Superagui National Park, biologist Tise is in charge of protecting the red-tailed parrot, the parrot. In Joinville, Ango continues his family's tradition of growing sugarcane and making melado syrup. On the island of Santa Catarina, Jaime cooks oysters he farms himself and serves them to his clients. Near Florianopolis, animals which have been the victims of illegal wildlife trade find refuge in Christian's Rescue Centre. In Porto Alegre, the musician Vitor sings of a different Brazil, far removed from the image of tropical life. Soya and rice are two foods cultivated in Marivan, which exports its produce as far as China. Finally, in the far south of Brazil, Hamilton makes sculptures with whale bones washed up on the shore to raise awareness of the need to protect the environment. Our first stop in the south of Brazil, the state of Paraná, and in the middle of the Paranaguá Bay, the magnificent Superagui National Park. Set between ocean and land, where several rivers meet the sea, the Superagui National Park covers just under 35,000 hectares. It provides shelter for diverse and species-rich ecosystems. As well as the restingues, low forest vegetation with small shrubs, the park offers protection to 4,700 square kilometers of the ancient Atlantic forest, the Mata Atlântica. At the center of the park, on the Rio Superagui, lies a string of islands, like Pinheirinho and Pineiro. Their forest vegetation provides a natural habitat for numerous endemic species, which is why the park is so well protected.
We're on the part of the biome of the Atlantic forest. It's one of the most threatened tropical rainforests in the world. This biome is of universal importance because of its great biodiversity and endemic species of both animals and plants. This is why the region has been named a World Heritage Site by UNESCO.
A biologist, Tise works for the Society for Wildlife Research and Environmental Education. She supervises a conservation project, which is a symbol of the park, the blue-cheeked parrot of the Amazon, the parrot, or red-tailed Amazon.
The population of the red-tailed Amazon numbers about 7,000 in the region. That's small. It should be between 30 and 40,000. So this is an animal threatened with extinction. Why? Because its population has dwindled and its habitat is restricted and vulnerable. Any deterioration in the region, however small, will put the survival of the species in danger. There is also the problem of the illegal wildlife trade. A beautiful animal is greatly admired and people want to own one. They're not content with appreciating in its natural habitat, as they should. So people take a baby from the forest, and in doing that they destroy the nest where the eggs are laid. Their eyes are still closed. They're less than a week old.
Tem uma semana de vida. Qual que tem berne para ver?
The main factor which is detrimental to the parrots reproducing is the lack of hollow tree trunks. If they don't find one, they don't reproduce. Parrots always return to the same spot. They return to the same spot to sleep, they return to the same spot to nest. And if they don't find a hole, they don't reproduce. So in 2003, we started to put up artificial nests. Nearly 1,000 nests since the beginning of the project. And we've already seen 956 babies born.
In her mission, Tise is supported by two park wardens, Aliska and Antonio. Former poachers, they are today the principal guardians of different species of parrots, which populate the islands of the Superagui.
I would never have imagined that there were projects for protecting the parrots and all types of animals. I've learnt a lot. We meet local people, we talk about life, we try to raise awareness.
In this surveillance program, Aleska and Antonio play a fundamental role. They live in the area and watch over the nests. They are there every day. They are respected in the community, and the fact that they go into the forest every day to check the nests puts off potential poachers and stops the nests being raided. It's very moving to see how far Aleska and Antonio have come since they began working on the project in 1998, and to see how they have become involved. The transformation is a huge victory.
Já vale muito.
Thanks to local awareness being raised, poaching has decreased considerably, and the number of parrots has significantly increased. Tise would now like the locals to invest more in the life of the park.
When I talk about conservation of this region, I'm not only thinking of the environment, but also the people who live here. They are under the illusion that other places are always better than here. My dream is that these people should realise that this place is fantastic, that this is where they should stay in order to be happy, that there should be interaction between the nature park and the local community, harmony, which isn't the case at present, that people should understand how precious this region is.
The next leg of our journey takes us from the Bay of Paraná to that of Babitonga, in the state of Santa Catarina, where we find the city of Joinville in the far corner. A paradise for birds, Paraná Bay forms one of the huge indentations on Brazil's southern coastline. At the mouth of the bay, the Ilha das Palmas, which consists of a group of 3 tiny islands just poking their heads above the waves, is still a heaven of peace, protected within the confines of the National Park of Ilha do Mel. On this large neighbouring island, guarding the channel leading into the bay, we find the remains of the fortress of Our Lady of Pleasures. Finished in 1769, it served to defend the colonial port of Paraná, situated about 15 kilometres upstream. Some 100 kilometres south of the wild idyllic beaches of Ilha do Mel, at the far end of the bay of Babitonga, sprawls Joinville, the main city in the state of Santa Catarina. To look at, it's no different to the nation's other big cities. But it has certain characteristics which make it feel more European. The half-timbered buildings remind us of Germany. Although it was named after François d'Orléans, Prince of Joinville, who married the daughter of the Emperor of Brazil in 1843, the city was mainly inhabited by immigrants from Hamburg, and also Switzerland and Norway. In the surrounding countryside near Strada Bonita is the Kirsten family fazenda, now run by Ango and his wife Dona Ivania. Like many of the local population, Ango's roots are both here and further afield, which suits him well.
I feel 100% Brazilian, even though I am of German extraction. My great-grandfather was German. But my grandparents and my parents were Brazilian, and we were born in Brazil. We feel 100% Brazilian. We feel 100% Brazilian. But we try to keep up old traditions.
Rising early, every morning Ango sets off to manage the sugar plantations he inherited from his father. A small estate specializing in the production and processing of sugarcane juice. It is also open for ecotourism. Hard physical work without much rest.
I manage a lot of things on the estate. We work together as a family. We don't have any employees. I show groups of tourists around the property.
While Ango is cutting sugarcane, his wife Dona Ivanir is busy crushing the stalks to extract the juice. This will be used to make a family speciality typical of the region, a kind of syrup called melado.
My great-grandfather came here in 1887. He started working with wood in construction. Then my grandfather began growing sugarcane and making cachaça and melado.
It's a family tradition. My husband is the 4th generation and my daughter's the 5th. I hope they will carry on making melado.
As well as farming, the Coastlines have set up a little corner dedicated to the past.
We realize that in today's urban areas, everything moves very fast. Technology and people end up losing track of their past. We set up this museum in 1997. At the time, my idea was to show children a bit of our history. We were surprised when some groups of older visitors got emotional and cried when they remembered the past. It happened several times. They are people who used to live in the country and use all the things we have on show. Now they live in apartments, and when they come here, they're reminded of their past and are overcome with emotion. We are conscious of the need to conserve our history. If I had to live in an apartment today, I'd feel like a caged bird. I'd hate it. Here you have freedom, technology, space. With everything we've got here, I'd never live in the town. Living in an apartment, surrounded by 4 walls, I'm 1,000 times happier staying here.
The next leg of our journey links Joinville via São Francisco do Sul to Florianopolis, the capital of Santa Catarina. Joinville is separated from the ocean by the island of São Francisco do Sul. It is home to a port of national importance, especially for container traffic. The old town of São Francisco still boasts a glorious heritage from colonial days, such as the Igreja Matriz, built at the end of the 18th century. Today, Babitonga Bay is frequented both by traffic from the port and water sports enthusiasts, as well, of course, as professional fishermen and shellfish farmers. At the far north of the island of São Francisco, perched on the ocean, is Fort Marechal Luz, built in 1909 to protect the bay. Moving down the coast of the state, some 100 kilometers further south, lies another stretch of beautiful coastline, the island of Santa Catarina, with a vast lagoon at its center. It's on this island that downtown Florianopolis, the capital city of the state, has developed. A small, prosperous and modern city, with a population of about 450,000, which lives mainly off the profits of its rich agriculture and industrial areas, which it is linked to by 2 bridges. With a high rise in its standard of living, the city is reputed throughout the nation for its quality of life. A stone's throw from the measured bustle of Florianopolis, days pass pleasurably in the little village of Freguesia do Ribeirão. Since it was introduced in the 1990s, oyster farming has become an important activity along the coastline of Santa Catarina Island. Jaime, a restaurateur, decided to take up the challenge.
In 1996, I decided to close my garage. At the time, only new cars were selling. No one wanted their old cars repaired. We embarked on this adventure in 1998. My childhood was like everyone else's in the community. I went to the village school. I trained as mechanic and began working in the community. We didn't really have any idea of the outside world. Our world was here.
To serve shellfish in his restaurant, Jaime decided to become his own supplier, wanting to have the very best.
The reason we started farming was that we wanted to offer oysters in a different way, different sizes, because clients all have their own preferences. Oysters must be alive in the basket. Oyster farmers know that they're a completely organic product because oysters are fed by nature, by the sun, by microalgae. You don't have to feed them. Oysters bring you the sea on your plate. That's what an oyster does.
You can see that some of these oysters are dead.
But only a few.
They're the ones which are open.
Yes, I can see. The crop is very different to last year's, thank goodness. It's going to be much better.
Tá muito legal, tá bem interessante. E aqui em Ribeirão da Ilha nós tivemos favorecimento.
Here in Ribeirão da Ilha, the climate is favorable. Steady temperatures of 17 degrees all year round.
E aí temos mais fator. Temos uma baía que
Moreover, there is very little current in the bay and not much difference in the tides, which means the oysters are always connected to their food supply.
Então tudo isso conectado faz daqui dessa região.
All these factors combined make our region the best place in the world to farm oysters. A 6-month-old oyster here would take 2 years to reach the same size in France, and sometimes 3 years in other countries.
Cachaça de sassafrás com anis. A construção desse espaço.
This place was built bit by bit.
Passo a passo. Quando
We started off serving in front of our house.
Casa,
This bit was the garden. The restaurant was built on the walls of the house. Where the kitchen is where our house was. We did everything you see here. It was all carefully planned. All the decorating was done by people who work here. Everyone was involved in the decorating.
Tiveram envolvimento direto com essa decoração. We
can learn a lot from food, because with a dish you can give advice, tell a story, you can demonstrate culture, local tradition, just with a dish.
Tudo dentro de prato. Por isso que eu digo sempre.
That's why I always say, before you learn to cook dishes from all over the world, you should learn to make specialities of your region, your own home. Gastronomy is a personal journey. I can't see myself far from the sea. I live above the restaurant, and I can hear the clatter of forks and plates practically all the time. It's reassuring, but tiring too sometimes. I'm in constant contact with the sea. When I look at the sea, it's like a refuge, a moment of me time when I feel good.
A bit further north, the Rio Vermelho Nature Park covers a large area between the ocean and the Fora Lagoon. It's in this conservation area that CITAS was founded, a refuge centre for somewhat unusual wildlife. Every Brazilian state has one. For instance, we have Magellanic penguins, native to Chile, but the centre takes in all kinds of species. Christian is president of R3 Animal, an NGO responsible for managing CITAS.
I'm a vet and specialise in wildlife. Here we take in animals from the whole of Santa Catarina, which are mainly victims of illegal wildlife trafficking. We also take in animals brought in by owners who no longer want them at home, or who were holding them illegally, and also penguins and sea lions which are washed up on the shore and which need treatment before they can be released into the sea again. The wildlife triage centres are run by the Environmental Police, the Brazilian Institute for the Protection of the Environment, and the R3 Animal NGO. R3 Animal staff are volunteers from all different professions. Anyone can come and help us, because we mainly need to organise everyday chores, cleaning out the pens, preparing meals, sometimes doing a few repairs, because if we wait for public services to do it, the result is not ideal. We help improve what the public services do.
The aim of the centre run by Christian is to care for and reintroduce, whenever possible, wildlife which is brought here. A lot are sea creatures, and the reason they are here is, sadly, largely due to human activity.
The main problems in the sea are lack of nutrition due to overfishing and pollution resulting from oil spillage. Because ships, instead of cleaning their tanks in the port, do it at sea and empty their oil residue. We have huge problems with waste. Most of the turtles brought here have ingested plastic, bottle tops, and all kinds of things. And when we do autopsies, we find their stomachs are full of waste.
The refuge takes in a lot of Magellanic penguins, which migrate from Patagonia between March and September to follow schools of fish as far as the ocean off the coast of southern Brazil.
The penguins which are weak, or victims of an environmental disaster out at sea, get washed up on our beaches.
Vem parar nas nossas praias, que a gente chama os pinguins, eles encalham, né?
Most of these penguins are young ones migrating for the first time. As they are inexperienced, they become weak and end up getting washed ashore. When they're ready to be released, this yellow plastic ring is replaced with a metal ring from the Conservation Centre for Wild Birds, which is the same throughout Brazil. It's very important because if we release an animal here and later on it's found further south in Brazil, or even in its colony in Patagonia, we know that our work doesn't end when we release the animal into its environment. Our work ends when the animal has returned to its colony.
Although they are supervised by the federal institute responsible for the protection of the environment in Brazil, CETAS's animal refuge centres cannot rely solely on the public for support.
In other countries, there are a lot of places which are really well equipped. It wouldn't be impossible to have that in Brazil. But we need sponsors, people sympathetic to our cause to support us. As I said before, there's no point complaining and expecting public services to finance everything. We have to find solutions ourselves. I came from São Paulo 11 years ago. I escaped from hectic city life in São Paulo. Living here in Florianopolis, I can work closely with penguins and sea lions. And on the way back, I go through Lagoon de Conceição, Mole Beach, and Joaquina Beach. You can't put a price on it. Things aren't all easy here, but I'd never go back to São Paulo.
Now we head for the Rio Grande do Sul, the southernmost state in Brazil and its capital, Porto Alegre. Bathed by the waters of the Rio Guaíba, Porto Alegre is the largest city of Brazil's 3 southern states, at the head of an agglomeration of nearly 4.5 million inhabitants, the 4th largest in the country. Despite its size, Porto Alegre boasts a lot of green spaces and implements urban policies which place a high value on the well-being of its inhabitants. These people, especially all those in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, are often still called gauchos, originally cowboys from the great wide plains of South America. But in an environment as modern as that of Porto Alegre, what does it mean to belong to a gaucho culture today? At the Central Market, a landmark in the city since it opened in 1869, the question is posed by Vitor, a well-known singer born in the region who has made his mark.
What does it mean to be a gaucho? That's not easy. Here we're all gauchos, townsfolk and peasants. In Uruguay and Argentina, a gaucho is from the country, a herdsman, someone who doesn't exist anymore. But we have incorporated the gaucho character.
A character whose presence at the Central Market is still very apparent at different stands and stalls, who sells traditional gaucho products.
Porto Alegre is a very green city with a fantastic river. There are several theatres, cinemas. It's very lively. There's lots going on in places where people meet up. There's a great buzz, people everywhere. Porto Alegre is a really special place. I like to think of Porto Alegre and Rio Grande do Sul in the context of the aesthetic of cold, as somewhere which is not marginal to the centre. When people sometimes say, oh, you're not in Rio or in Sao Paulo, in different regions in Brazil the question often comes up. How can you bear to be on the fringes of the centre? And I often answer that we aren't on the fringes of the centre, but at the middle of a different story. The theatre in São Pedro is a good example of somewhere in Porto Alegre which represents and symbolises the city. The theatre was restored by Dona Eva Sofer. It's an important part of cultural life. You could say it's the cultural heart of the city. Of course, that's not an objective opinion, because that's where I play most, where I promote my CDs, and I work on a lot of projects with the theatre's orchestras. It's a magical place, and I know that all the artists from abroad or from Brazil who come to the theatre are enthralled. It's a real jewel, part of our cultural and artistic heritage. It's a really important place.
We restored it with a lot of love, and it's love that was lacking. That's why it fell into such a state of disrepair. But today is a splendid place, and all the actors and artists soak it in, because the walls are steeped in 155 years of culture.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. The citizens of Porto Alegre adore the theatre. You feel it, don't you?
Yes, enormously. And you are very much appreciated. People know what to expect when they come to see Victor Ramel. It's a full house.
Yeah, we've had good times here.
On the roof terrace of the Gasometro, a former factory converted into a cultural centre, Vito and his band are doing an impromptu concert.
Nesse café e você chora leite de manhã. Amarro meu sapato e tu veste o sutiã. Cadê o nosso amor? Me diz onde vou correndo pegar o bonde. Que linha liga o teu coração ao meu. Almoço minha angústia e tu ri com a cara na TV.
When I lived in Rio, I realised that the cold represented us, and that we were representative of the cold in the context of Brazil. The whole world and Brazilians themselves think of Brazil as a tropical country. This image of a tropical Brazil didn't work for us, Brazilians from the south, and we played no part in creating this image. At the same time, I felt blocked artistically. I couldn't allow myself the freedom to compose a samba because I thought it was too Brazilian, as if I wasn't Brazilian myself. As soon as we, as gauchos, began to embrace our own culture, our climate, our way of life, I think we started contributing to Brazil's diversity.
Uma contribuição grande para a diversidade brasileira.
For the penultimate leg of our journey, we set off to discover the huge Lagoa dos Patos and the agricultural riverbanks of the Camacá region. The Rio Grande do Sul proudly stands beside the biggest lagoon in Latin America. after Maracaibo in Venezuela. Measuring 10,000 square kilometers, the Lagoa dos Patos, literally the lagoon of the ducks, is a vast stretch of salt water, separated from the ocean by a wide sandbank. The Rio Grande do Sul is one of Brazil's most important agricultural states, with pasture and cropland right up to the shoreline. Extensive garlic and onion cultivation makes local production the third largest in Brazil, while at the same time allowing the system of family smallholdings to survive. There are two main crops in Rio Grande do Sul: rice and soya. In the Camacá region, next to the lagoon, they are often planted in rotation. This is the case at the Fazenda Modelo Capão da Moça, owned by Morivan, the biggest soya producer in the region. He and José Carlos, his agronomy advisor, talk of their love of the land over and above what it yields.
We grew up here, and we're attached to the land and everything you can see. How can you harm the place you live in? We have a strong bond with our region.
Early in the morning, you wake up. There must be over 1,000 birds surrounding the house. There's a little fox we call grachainha, which cries out every morning. So you wake up, open the window, and you see the green fields of soya, of rice, and all the birds singing. You can't put a price on it. It's just fantastic. You can't put a price on it. It's just fantastic.
Morivan, like a great majority of soya producers in Brazil, has chosen to grow genetically modified seed from the Monsanto Group laboratories. Brazil is now the second largest GM user in the world after the United States. Although there remains great uncertainty, especially in Europe, over the effect of these organisms on the environment and on human health, the choice of this development is widely accepted in Brazil.
Genetically modified soya is more resistant to humidity, to different types of soil and to the microclimate of our region. It's a difficult microclimate, but the soya has adapted well, which is positive. We used to have a system of monoculture, but all monoculture is bad.
Soya cultivation has become important in the region because crop rotation with rice improves the soil. Our region is a big producer of rice. We use soya to improve the soil, and this allows us to produce a lot more rice. Rice is more profitable for us to produce than soya, but soya allows us to clean up the soil and make it richer. Here, rice is called green gold. The fields are all green, and when the rice is ripe, it turns to gold. That's why we call rice green gold. Soya came to the region later and was called yellow gold.
In this vast and typically gaucho landscape, modern life appears in the form of big agro-industrial machinery. Morivan doesn't only produce crops. He processes his rice and soya for food products sold worldwide. For Gaucho, according to José Carlos, it's all a matter of perspective.
It's said that the gaucho at the edge of the lagoon has broad vision, whereas the gaucho from the mountains has a narrower vision. The lagoon brings us peace, makes us feel good. The lagoon brings us peace, makes us feel good, and it's what makes the region rich. People who live here are attached to the lagoon. They look after it and want to live close to it. Because without all this water that you can see, we wouldn't have such wonderful riches.
I wouldn't want to live far away from here, from this coast. It's an area of unfathomable natural beauty. It's incredibly beautiful. It can't be equal.
Beauty nonetheless marred by pollution, often invisible, which intensive farming creates in both soil and waterways. At the far south of the Lagoa dos Patos, the city of Rio Grande has developed on a small peninsula at the entrance to the channel which leads to the ocean. This advantageous position has allowed for the development of a very busy port, one of the biggest in South America. To protect ships passing between the ocean and the lagoon, the channel entrance quickly became the object of huge construction. The Molls de Barra, two enormous breakwaters built between 1911 and 1919. Classified amongst the biggest maritime constructions in the world, it took over 4.5 million tons of stone to build them. The breakwaters were reinforced by tetrapods after chinks appeared in the 1980s. Structures which offer perfect resting places for the hundreds of sea lions which have settled here, forming a small, semi-permanent colony. But the breakwaters are not only accessible to the pinnipeds. The tracks of an old railway line, which was used to transport materials, has been put to more folkloric use. Wagons, like carts with sails, offer tourists a 4-kilometre seaside trip along the western breakwater. Just behind this breakwater sprawls the Praia do Cassino, an endless stretch of sand, thought to be the longest in the world. 235 kilometres uninterrupted from the entrance of the lagoon to Chuy at the border. Our final destination on this Brazilian journey, Barra do Chuy, at the end of Praia do Cassino, at the border with Uruguay. All along the Praia do Cassino, the harsh landscape of the coastal plain reveals itself. A land rich in farming, of course, the legacy of large 19th century plantations. But this landscape of restingas and pastureland, sprangled with wetlands, is not exempt from change. On the often sandy soil near the coast, recent conifer plantations raise their alpine foliage. Between the sea and the lagoon, beach and plain, the coast of Rio do Grande do Sul offers constant permeation between land and water, where man does not really seem to belong. Somewhere near the Barra do Chuy, the seemingly deserted beach sometimes reveals a tale of tragedy. Skeletons of right or humpback whales are not unusual here, as sea mammals quite often get washed ashore. Cetaceans are not the only ones which come to die on the Praia do Cassino. The ocean is not kind to its children, but man usually plays a part in these animals getting stranded. a source of both concern and inspiration for Hamilton, a local artist.
In the sky, on land, and at sea. I think man has reached his limits. We need to do something urgently here, at the end of the world, as this region is called because it's the furthest corner of Brazil, and to start to change our way of thinking, to learn to live off and profit from nature, at the same time as respecting it, which I believe is fundamental to quality of life.
Hamilton is a sculptor. By chance, and also through passion and social conscience, he has specialized in collecting and reusing materials washed up by the sea.
The first time I saw a whalebone, I was amazed by its size, by how rich the texture was. There have been a lot of whales washed ashore recently. Using this material also makes people aware of the plight of these animals. And I offer the viewers a new language, discovering a different kind of work. I would call my type of work organic abstract. This wood is a piece of tree which probably comes from the Amazon. It's very rare because the tree was felled about 30 years ago. The wood industry uses rivers to transport trunks. The river flows into the sea, and the sea brought us this piece of wood.
Hamilton takes his finds to his workshop, a veritable museum for wood and bones, where certain pieces speak volumes.
I was going to the Faro de Almadao when I found myself face to face with this huge trunk. You wouldn't believe how much wood from the deforestation of the Amazon ends up here.
Paolo, an agronomist friend, has come to examine the trunk in question.
How many years has it taken for this tree to absorb enough carbon to get to this site?
It's a red cedar, which must be about 30 meters tall.
This trunk comes from illegal trade in wood from the Amazon. It doesn't come from the Cerrado forest. At that size, I think it comes from further up, from the Amazon rainforest. The trees are felled to make room for other activities, mainly cultivation of soya, but also animal farming, pasture land. People cut down trees, like here in our forests, to make fields for cows, for planting soya. A lot of rice producers went there. In Maranhão, there are a lot of rice producers, some from here, from Santa Victoria.
It's monocultures which devastate the rainforest. Brazil is a wonderful country, but sometimes I feel sad when I see what they're doing here. People are in too much of a hurry. Everything happens too quickly.
Through his work and the teaching he does with the Balena Australis Institute, Hamilton asserts his ecological artistic identity.
I find a lot of whale bones. I transform the material into a work of art. By making a work of art from this material which comes from an animal, a corpse, a death which to me is tragic, it's a way of bringing this animal back to life. The aesthetic value is important. It must be beautiful too, even though the work is meant to criticize the death of whales, which has reached terrifying heights in the last few years. We still live in times of unfettered expansion of capitalism. People craving the illusion of comfort. We're advancing fast, but where to? In my opinion, we're going to pay the price for our perverseness.
With the faces of these people we have met in the south of the country, we end this episode and our 8,000-kilometre journey along the coast of Brazil.